Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rachel. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about something simple, but kind of important, that's just been sitting with me. I was out walking Reggie the other day, listening to a playlist that came out of those Buddhist monks walking for peace. There's a song on it with a line that just kind of stuck with me. A young girl asks a monk, "Why do you walk so far?" And he smiles and answers, "To show you who you are." And then this line, "You are not your sorrow. You are not your fear. You are the light within you that the world forgot to hear." That's it. That's the heart of what I want to talk about. Because right now, a lot of people don't need more information. They don't need more arguments. They don't need more opinions. They need to remember deep down who they are. So that's exactly what this is about. Remembering who you are when pressure is applied and why that matters. We're living in a moment where the pressure is constant. No matter where you live in the world, you can feel it. What's weird is that on the surface, in a lot of places, life usually looks normal. People are running errands, going to work, making small talks. And in some ways, that's good. Life has to keep moving. But underneath, a lot of people feel unsettled, unsafe, worn down, a little unmoored. And this is what happens when people get overwhelmed and stay that way for too long. They don't always fall apart outwardly. They just disappear internally. Still here, still functioning, but they're not really present anymore. That is one of the quiet dangers of pressure. Not that people suddenly believe the wrong things, but that they stop trusting themselves. They get exhausted. They disengage. They go numb. And a numbed out mind is easier to push around than a grounded one. It's not a judgment. It's just something history shows us over and over again. There's that old quote that's getting passed around a lot these days. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Now, I don't hear that as a call to panic. I hear it as a warning about disengagement, about what happens when decent people get so overwhelmed that they quietly step back. Not because they don't care, but because they're tired. And this is where remembering who you are actually matters. All of this affects you, obviously. It matters. But it's not who you are. You are not your anger or your fear. You're not your political affiliation or even your religion. You are a human being first. Now, that is not some soft hallmark sentiment. It's grounding. Because when you forget that, it gets a lot easier to justify things that you never would have before. And that's not a new problem. That is history. This is where Stoicism actually kind of earns its keep. The Stoics warned about losing your inner compass. They lived through corruption, power grabs, violence, instability, all of it. But they weren't sitting around pretending everything was fine. What we're dealing with now isn't some brand new human malfunction. There have always been people who try this, and unfortunately, there probably always will be. The real question has never been whether that happens. The question is what kind of people everyone becomes when it does, and when it gets hard. Seneca talked about how dangerous it is to let the outside world decide who you are, because once you hand over your inner compass, everything else gets shaky. He believed that what you think of yourself matters a lot more than what the crowd thinks, especially when fear is in the driver's seat. And the crowd keeps changing lanes. Lose that footing, and it gets hard to know where you stand. Buddhism comes at this from a different angle, but lands in pretty much the same place. It doesn't tell you not to feel fear or anger. It tells you not to let it become your entire identity. Fear shows up. Anger shows up. That's being human. But when fear becomes who you are, that is when clarity goes out the window. When we confuse what we're feeling with who we are, clarity slips. And when clarity goes, we tend to harden or check out. Neither helps. Most people don't actually want to live in a constant state of fear or division. We know this because when something calm and grounded shows up, people respond. That's why those monks have struck such a nerve. They aren't yelling. They aren't explaining. They aren't trying to convince anyone. They're just walking, steady, grounded, human. And millions of people are responding. Not because they were told to, but because something in them recognized it. People are starving for sanity. Not wanting this mess isn't enough if we forget who we are while we're living through it. Pressure doesn't care what you prefer. It shows you what you're anchored to. So the real question isn't just what do you oppose? It's who are you when things get uncomfortable? And not just who are you, but who you want to be. Because those things aren't always the same under pressure. This isn't about ignoring what's happening. And it's not about changing anybody's mind. That is not going to happen at this point. It's about clarity. About not letting confusion turn you into somebody you don't recognize. About staying clear enough to respond instead of react. To speak when it matters. To refuse cruelty when it's normalized. To not go numb just because it's easier. That's not passivity, that's restraint with a spine. Remembering that we're all human does not mean tolerating everything. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself here, but basic human decency isn't optional, and it doesn't disappear just because someone is loud or powerful or cruel. Everyone deserves to be treated as a human, but behavior still matters. Choices still matter. And harm does not magically become okay just because it's dressed up as authority or policy or just how things are. Look, some people are obviously committed to cruelty. Some people feed off it. This isn't about convincing them because that just ain't happening. It's about not becoming them. So yeah, remember who you are. You're not a label or a reaction. You're not your fear, sadness, or anger. You are the steadier part underneath all of that. The part the world keeps trying to drown out. And if you watched my last video, this is the bridge. Staying human starts with remembering who you are. There are way more people trying to live with decency, clarity, and restraint than the noise would have you believe. They're not screaming. They're not dominating the conversation, but they're there. And holding that line quietly, clearly, isn't small. It's how anything better actually survives. Thanks for being here. As always, take care of you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.